A black woman quietly takes her seat in business class. She has the ticket, the credentials, the right, but within minutes, she's asked to move for a white man who says nothing at all. What would you do if the world saw you as less, even when you had built the very system they're asking you to step aside for? She doesn't raise her voice, she doesn't argue, but 30 minutes later, the entire airline is forced to reckon with who she really is and what she represents. Who is this woman? Why did the flight crew panic when they finally learned her name? And how did a single passenger's silence ripple all the way to Congress? This isn't just a story about a flight gone wrong. It's a story about quiet power, systemic injustice, and what happens when dignity refuses to be dismissed. Stay with us as we unfold a journey that began with one wrong assumption and ended with a nationwide reform. If this story moves you, if it makes you think, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Now, let's begin. The boarding area at Gate E19 inside Denver Horizon International wasn't crowded yet, but the tension in the air had already begun to settle in like humidity before a storm. Conversations were soft, interrupted by the low whir of an espresso machine behind the glass of the adjacent cafe. Most people barely noticed the older black woman as she stepped out of the priority access line. She moved slowly but purposefully, not because of age, but because she had nothing to prove to anyone. Naomi Ellington adjusted the strap of her worn leather bag over one shoulder and glanced down at her phone. Flight 4682, on time, Phoenix to D.C., business class, seat 3B. She let out a quiet breath, the kind you exhale when you already sense the day may require more of you than expected. Her coat was cream wool, simple but well-tailored. Her shoes, low-heeled and polished. She wore no flashy jewelry, just a silver watch with a mother-of-pearl face. Initials barely visible along the band N.E. Her hair was coiled into a soft bun under a knitted beret. She looked like someone's history professor, or perhaps a pastor's wife, or maybe just someone who had learned the hard way how to navigate spaces that rarely looked like her. She stepped toward the gate agent, who barely looked up from her screen. Name, the woman asked flatly. Naomi Ellington. She replied. The agent typed, paused, then nodded. You're in Group 1. We'll begin boarding shortly. Naomi nodded once in return and stepped back. Nearby, a young Latina woman holding a tablet watched this interaction with growing unease. That was Gabriela Cruz, Naomi's assistant, recently hired but fiercely loyal. Gabriela had noticed it before, the way people scanned Naomi like she might be lost, or like she'd wandered into a part of the airport she didn't belong in. She's the CEO of Ellington Tech Logistics. Gabriela had once snapped at a TSA agent who gave Naomi extra screening. Naomi had gently touched her arm and said, It's all right. We choose when to correct and when to conserve energy. But Gabriela had never liked that phrase. To her, silence felt too much like surrender. Now she watched as Naomi took a seat across from the boarding gate, reaching into her bag to pull out a book. Not a Kindle, a real book, pages worn soft. Her nails were short, hands elegant. She didn't fidget, she didn't scroll, she waited, as if her life had taught her that patience was a strategy, not a passive act. From behind the counter, one of the flight attendants appeared blonde, fit, with a tight smile and clipped steps. Her name tag read Lauren Hadley. She whispered something to the gate agent, eyes glancing toward Naomi. Gabriela noticed. So did Naomi. though she didn't look up. She had seen that look before. The PA crackled. Pre-boarding will begin shortly for our passengers needing extra assistance or traveling with small children, followed by Group 1, our business class guests. Naomi stood, folding the page of her book gently. She stepped forward again, joining the short line. A white man in a navy blazer, holding a tablet and wired earbuds, turned and gave her a polite nod. She returned it. Carter Benson, she'd later learn, but for now, he was just another businessman in boarding zone 1. The boarding scan beeped as Naomi presented her pass. "Thank you, Ms. Ellington," the gate agent said automatically. Naomi stepped onto the jet bridge, her stride still steady, coat unwrinkled despite the long morning. She always preferred early morning flights. Fewer surprises, fewer chances for people to question her presence, at least in theory, inside the aircraft. Flight attendant Lauren Hadley stood by the cabin door, smiling tightly. "Good morning," Naomi said with quiet warmth. Lauren barely nodded. "Seat?" she asked. 3B. Lauren's eyebrows lifted slightly, almost imperceptibly, straight ahead, left side. Naomi walked down the aisle of business class, just ahead of the main boarding rush. Only a few passengers had taken their seats. She located 3B, placed her tote under the seat in front of her, and sat down with practiced precision. She folded her coat on her lap and placed her boarding pass in the seat pocket. She didn't recline, she didn't sigh, but she did glance out the window only briefly before closing her eyes and resting her hands, one on top of the other, on her coat. Gabriella texted her from outside. "Let me know if you need me. Still near the gate. And all good. Thank you. Eyes forward." 2 minutes passed. Then came the voice. "Excuse me. Ma'am, can I see your boarding pass again?" Naomi opened her eyes. Lauren Hadley stood beside her now, arms folded. Naomi blinked once, then reached calmly into the seat pocket and handed over the same pass she'd just shown moments ago. Lauren read it, paused, looked again. "I think there may have been a mix-up. This seat's been assigned to another passenger." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "I believe it's mine," she said evenly. Lauren pursed her lips. "Well, this is business class. Sometimes the system auto-upgrades economy tickets if there's a change at check-in. I just need to confirm." Naomi gave a slow nod. "Of course." Lauren didn't move right away. Her eyes lingered. Naomi asked, still calm, "Is there a reason you're doubting the pass I just showed Lauren seemed to shift slightly?" "It's just procedure, ma'am." Naomi didn't respond. She simply turned back to the window. Outside, Gabriella watched the exchange from the terminal window, something sinking in her chest. Something was happening, and it wasn't just procedure. Naomi Ellington had flown this route a dozen times. She didn't enjoy flying, but she respected the quiet rituals of it. The way the jet bridge always hissed when it sealed, the way the cabin lights adjusted to each boarding phase, the way people revealed who they were by how they waited, how they treated those around them, how they took up space. She didn't mind waiting. What she minded were the assumptions. Lauren Hadley returned 2 minutes later. Her expression was tighter than before. In her hand, she still held Naomi's boarding pass. "I spoke to the gate. Lauren said, there's a discrepancy. They show a Naomi Ellington in economy plus row 16. Naomi didn't flinch. I booked business class. My assistant confirmed it at check-in this morning." Lauren nodded. Once, the way someone does when they're trying to appear agreeable while holding their ground. Well, systems can sometimes misassign seats. I'm going to need you to move until we resolve it. Naomi adjusted her seat belt slowly, not to remove it, to make a point. I'd prefer to remain seated while you do that. Lauren blinked, surprised, not by the words, but by the calm in which they were delivered. Ma'am, this is not optional. Naomi raised an eyebrow, then turned to face her fully. Did the other passenger claiming this seat to show you his ticket? Lauren's gaze flicked toward the galley, where Carter Benson stood, coffee in hand, scrolling through his phone like he owned the aircraft. No, she admitted. Why not? Naomi asked softly. Lauren hesitated. The kind of hesitation that comes not from confusion, but from realization. I'll check, she said finally, and turned toward the front. Carter Benson looked up as Lauren approached. He smiled with that relaxed charm that men like him wore like a tie, confident, effortless, unimpressed. Mornin', he said. We good? Can I see your boarding pass? Please. He chuckled. Sure, but I'm 3B. I always fly this route. Lauren forced a smile and took the digital pass from his screen. She glanced at it. She paused. Thank you, she said, and handed it back. Then she returned to Naomi. There may be 2 bookings in the same seat, she said. We're trying to resolve it with the ground crew. In the meantime, we ask that you relocate to seat 16F so that Mr. Benson can be seated while we sort it out. Naomi looked at the boarding pass still resting on Lauren's clipboard. I've paid for this seat, she said evenly. I've flown this airline every month for the last 7 years. This is not my first time in business class. Lauren stood straighter. I understand, but I'm following policy. You're refusing crew instructions. Naomi let out a slow, measured breath. She looked toward the aisle. Passengers were still boarding. Some glanced over, pretending not to watch, but watching all the same. Gabriella was already texting from the window seat in the terminal. G. They're asking you to move N. Yes, G. This is absurd. Do you want me to come back there? And not yet. Eyes open. Watch everything. Lauren shifted uncomfortably. Another flight attendant approached now. A young black woman with kind eyes and a badge that read Tiana Brooks. She said nothing, just hovered near Lauren's shoulder, as if summoned to neutralize the discomfort. Naomi looked at her. Do you believe I should move? She asked gently. Tiana blinked. I think we're just trying to get everyone seated. That's not what I asked. Lauren interrupted quickly. Let's not put our team in a difficult spot. Naomi returned her gaze to Lauren. I'm not the one doing that. From row 4, a phone clicked on. Someone had begun recording. Lauren saw it and sighed. This is not necessary, but it is, said a voice from the back. It was a woman mid-30s, locks wrapped in a scarf, denim jacket half-zipped. Her name was Janelle Hart, and she hadn't planned to speak up. But something about Naomi's stillness, about the way her voice carried without volume, made Janelle feel like silence would be a betrayal. Why is she being asked to move before you verify anything Janelle asked aloud? A few heads turned. Another phone rose. Naomi remained seated, hands still folded in her lap. Lauren's radio crackled. She turned away to answer. Naomi caught a few phrases. Supervisor en route. Passenger refusing relocation. Possible boarding delay. Naomi glanced at her watch. Still 20 minutes before scheduled takeoff. She reached into her bag and removed a small folder, From it, she pulled out a silver ID card. Nothing flashy, just embossed initials, a seal, the kind of thing most people wouldn't recognize unless they knew where the real power sat. She placed it gently on the tray table and waited. When Marcus Reed arrived 5 minutes later, he was already rattled. He didn't show it on his face, but his eyes gave him away. He was tall, early 40s, bald, confident but cautious. His navy blazer didn't fit quite right, and he kept checking his tablet like it would offer him cover. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, polite but firm. "I understand there's a concern with your seat assignment." Naomi nodded once. "Yes. The concern is that you're about to violate your own federal compliance policy." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "I beg your pardon." Naomi handed him her boarding pass and pointed to the ID on the tray. "Naomi Ellington, verified stakeholder. Business class seat 3B, confirmed at check-in. You can call the oversight board if you like. The number's on file." Marcus glanced at the ID, then at his tablet. He typed quickly. His eyes stopped mid-scroll. There it was, flagged in red internal oversight. Governance tier active, do not delay. He looked up slowly. "I see." Lauren leaned forward. "What does that mean?" Marcus didn't answer. His hand went to his earpiece. Naomi's voice came again, soft as ever. "You're welcome to verify everything, but I won't be leaving this seat." Tiana looked away. Lauren looked at Marcus. Marcus looked at the screen again. Then at Naomi. For the first time, he didn't see an older woman in the wrong seat. He saw a system that had been caught in the act of its own assumption. Behind them, Janelle's voice whispered into her phone mic. "This ain't just a seating issue." She panned her live stream camera slowly toward Naomi, then back toward the confused attendants. "This is about who they expect to belong, and who they don't." And the flight hadn't even closed its doors yet. Naomi Ellington had always known the difference between error and assumption. One was a glitch in a system. The other was a glitch in judgment. What she was watching now, in row 3 of ViraJet Flight 4682, had nothing to do with computers. As Marcus Reed stood in the aisle, still blinking at his tablet, Naomi observed the way he held it like a shield. His mouth opened, then closed again, as if language had suddenly become foreign. Behind him, Lauren Hadley shifted uneasily. She was still holding Naomi's boarding pass, but it now felt too warm in her hand, like a thing she no longer had the right to touch. Naomi looked toward the front of the cabin. Boarding had paused. The hum of movement in the aircraft stilled. That hush, that dangerous hush, had returned. People weren't just watching now, they were witnessing. "I'll need to verify this with operations," Marcus finally said. Naomi responded gently. "You have 90 seconds. Then I'll make my call." Marcus looked startled. Call to whom Naomi didn't blink. "Governance." Lauren stepped forward. "There's no need for that. I'm sure we can work something out." Naomi's gaze slid to her. "You had an opportunity to work something out. You made a decision based on what you saw, not what you confirmed." Lauren's face flushed pink. Tiana Brooks, still standing to the side, tried to catch Marcus's attention. She mouthed something, but he was already turning, retreating up the aisle with his tablet and Naomi's ID in hand. Janelle Hart's voice came again, soft but clear into her phone mic. She said, "Governance. That's not customer service, that's upper floor." The live stream view count was rising. On the terminal side, Gabriela Cruz watched it unfold through the window. She wasn't filming, but she was documenting. She had already emailed the airline's legal division, attaching screenshots of Naomi's boarding pass and the crew's handling. She was no longer waiting for an apology. She was preparing evidence. Inside the cabin, Carter Benson finally spoke. His voice was low and awkward, a half apology wrapped in charm. "Look, I really don't mind switching seats if it's that important." Naomi turned to him. "This isn't about the seat." He nodded, unsure of how to respond. For the first time since he boarded, Carter Benson didn't look amused. Lauren tried again. "Ma'am, with all due respect, we have a full flight and we're just trying to keep things moving. If you could cooperate just a little longer." Naomi raised a hand. Not to interrupt, but to steady the air between them. "I've cooperated for decades," she said softly. "I've cooperated in rooms where I was the only one who looked like me. I've cooperated through silence, through patience, through the benefit of the doubt. But what you're asking now is not cooperation. It's erasure." The sentence hung there. Row 6 went still. Row 8 stopped whispering. Even the overhead announcement seemed to pause. Lauren blinked. Her mouth opened again, but no sound came. Naomi continued, "And the first assumption you made was that I didn't belong in this seat. That's where all of this began. In the galley." Marcus's voice came through his headset. Lauren answered it quickly. "Yes, yes, she's still seated." "Confirmed. Are you sure I see?" "No. I didn't know." She turned back toward Naomi. But Naomi had already opened her folder again. From it, she pulled out a single sheet of printed policy. The header read, "Internal Stakeholder, Oversight, Vera Jet Aviation Group." Tiana stepped closer, curiosity on her face. Naomi didn't look up. "This policy is available to every employee through your HR portal," she said evenly. "It outlines what happens when a Tier 1 stakeholder is subject to systemic bias aboard an active flight. Would you like me to read it to you?" Lauren shook her head. "I'm aware of it now." Naomi folded the paper neatly and returned it to her folder. The cabin door remained open. A supervisor from ground control now stood at the edge of the boarding area, staring into the aircraft. He held a phone to his ear and mouthed something to Marcus. The passengers were no longer just seated. They were invested. Janelle whispered again to her audience. "This ain't a seating chart problem. This is a pattern." Naomi watched Marcus approach again, slower this time, his tablet held lower. "Ms. Ellington," he said with more weight in his voice, "we've confirmed your stakeholder status and seat assignment. There was an internal database lag. The error was ours." Naomi remained still. "You've confirmed it," she said. "But what will you do with what you confirmed?" Marcus hesitated. "We'd like to offer our deepest apologies and ask for your patience while we resolve the delay." Naomi looked at him fully for the first time. "You're not apologizing for the delay," she said. "You're apologizing for being seen doing something that happens more often than you admit." Lauren stood behind Marcus now, quiet, her hands clasped in front of her. Naomi tilted her head. "You assumed I couldn't afford to sit here, that I must have been upgraded by mistake, that I'd quietly relocate if asked. You assumed all that before you checked the system, before you asked the man next to me, before you treated me like a paying customer." Marcus lowered his eyes. Naomi exhaled. "I'm not interested in a voucher. I'm interested in process. And right now, your process is on record." Gabriella's phone buzzed. "From Legal Dept, Vera Jet message received, logged. Internal escalation initiated. Stakeholder level, Tier 1, Ellington, Naomi, inside the plane. Naomi leaned back slightly. "I will remain seated in 3B," she said calmly. "You may resume boarding." Marcus gave a subtle nod to the gate agent outside. The boarding call resumed. The door closed. The pre-flight announcement returned to its usual rhythm, but the atmosphere inside business class had changed entirely. Lauren returned to the galley. Tiana lingered. "I just want to say," she began, but Naomi waved her off gently. "Don't apologize for someone else's learning curve," she said. Tiana's eyes widened, then softened. "Thank you," she whispered. As the cabin lights dimmed for departure, Naomi placed her folder back into her tote. She glanced once more at Carter Benson, who now sat in 3A, stiffly facing forward. She didn't need his remorse. She needed him to remember this. When the wheels lifted off the runway, Naomi looked out the window, then closed her eyes. The first assumption had been made. Now came the consequences. The plane had reached cruising altitude, but Naomi Ellington felt anything but settled. She didn't show it, of course. She sat upright in seat 3B, her hands gently resting on her lap, her posture composed as ever. But under that stillness lived something more active. Not anger, not even disappointment, something closer to calculation. She had watched the entire interaction from earlier replay in her mind, not because she needed to relive it, but because she needed to study the angles, the sequence, the silences, the moment when her presence became a problem and someone else's presence became the default. Across the aisle, Carter Benson had finally taken off his Bluetooth earpiece. He was now sipping ginger ale, flipping absently through a sky menu he wouldn't order from. He hadn't looked her way since takeoff, not once. That, too, was familiar. There was a kind of man who looked away, not out of shame, but because silence had always served him. Carter didn't need to apologize. The world would apologize for him. Naomi's gaze returned to the clouds beyond the window. She didn't need Carter's regret. She needed the system that had assumed she didn't belong to recognize that it had revealed itself more clearly than it realized. She adjusted her seat, not to recline, just to reposition. From the row behind her, Janelle Hart whispered into her phone mic again. She's not saying a word, but the whole plane can feel her presence. This ain't over. The comments on her live stream were flooding in. She's too calm. That's the kind of calm that changes things. Why didn't they ask the white guy for ID first? Why do people assume we don't belong in business class? He looks like he belongs, and that's the problem. Those words stuck. He looks like he belongs. That was the beginning of every assumption. The story people told themselves when someone took up space they didn't expect them to, and the story they wrote for someone else who matched their mental picture of power. Naomi thought back to the hotel lobby 2 weeks ago in San Diego, where the concierge had offered her bottled water while asking, "Are you here to visit one of the guests?" She'd smiled then, too, and said, "No, I'm the keynote." The memory passed. The cabin lights dimmed slightly. The seatbelt sign remained off. Tiana Brooks walked down the aisle slowly. She wasn't serving anything yet, just checking rows. When she reached Naomi, she paused. "Can I offer you anything to drink, Ms. Ellington?" Her tone was quieter now, not performative, more like reverence. Naomi looked up, then nodded. "Just water, please, no ice." Tiana nodded once and moved away. From across the aisle, Carter Benson finally spoke, Ms. Ellington, Naomi turned her head. I didn't mean to cause all that, honestly. She let the moment breathe before responding. Yet here we are. He cleared his throat. I figured they had it sorted. Didn't think I needed to show my boarding pass. And you didn't, Naomi said. Carter sat straighter. That's not my fault, though. That's on the airline. Naomi tilted her head. It's not about fault. It's about how quickly the benefit of the doubt is handed out, and to whom. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Tiana returned with a glass of water, placing it on Naomi's tray table with care. Let me know if you need anything else, she said softly. Naomi thanked her. Across the plane, conversations were quieter than usual. People could feel that something had happened, even if they didn't know exactly what. The delay had already been explained over the intercom as a technical boarding issue, but no one believed that. The hush had meaning now. Everyone felt it. In the cockpit, the captain had requested an update on the situation, not the flight path, the one involving the stakeholder. He had heard enough keywords pass through headsets to know something bigger than seating had taken place. Meanwhile, in the terminal at Denver Horizon, Gabriella Cruz was on her laptop, connected to ViraJet's internal portal. She had already submitted 2 flagged memos under Naomi's shareholder access. One was marked Policy Breach, Active Flight Bias Incident. The second was labeled Proposed Activation of Clause 11.3, Equity Oversight Trigger. The second one was bold. Clause 11.3 hadn't been used in 2 years. Its purpose, to halt active operations on a designated flight route, pending emergency review of stakeholder treatment and systemic breach. In simpler terms, the ability to ground operations from the sky. She hovered her cursor over the submit button. Naomi hadn't told her to push it yet, but Gabriella was watching. Back on the plane, Naomi reached into her tote and pulled out a single page. It was printed on linen paper, folded once. At the top, it read Flight Equity Initiative, Internal Memo, prepared by N. Ellington. She didn't open it yet. She just held it in her lap, like something waiting to be used. Carter Benson shifted uncomfortably. I didn't mean to step on anything, he said again. Naomi looked at him gently. You didn't step on anything, Mr. Benson. You simply arrived the way the world expects you to. The problem is when others do the same and get treated like an accident. He nodded slowly. This time, he didn't argue. From behind them, a new voice spoke. I'd like to say something. It came from the older woman in 4D, soft-spoken, but with that undeniable southern calm. I've been flying for over 40 years, she said, and I've seen this happen too many times to count, but I've never seen anyone handle it the way you just did. Naomi turned slightly to see her. Thank you, she said. No, the woman replied. Thank you. You didn't just take your seat. You held space for the rest of us. Naomi nodded once, quietly. It wasn't the loud kind of recognition. It was better. It was truth. And that truth was spreading. Naomi Ellington had never needed a stage to make her presence known. Her strength lived in stillness. Her resolve didn't shout. It listened, calculated, waited. That was the power people underestimated the most. Now, seated firmly in 3B, her glass of water untouched, Naomi remained quiet while the cabin moved around her in slow, uncertain ripples. Flight attendants continued walking the aisle, avoiding her row. The hum of conversation returned, but softer than before. like everyone understood they were no longer just on a flight. They were inside something else now, a reckoning. Lauren Hadley stood at the front galley with her arms crossed tightly, glancing toward Naomi every few seconds. Her face had lost the forced smile she wore during boarding. Now it was flushed with a kind of professional panic, the realization that she hadn't just made a mistake. She'd made one in public. Behind her, Tiana Brooks spoke into the crew intercom, requesting updated service instructions. Her tone was professional, but her posture told a different story. She stood taller now, not because of protocol, but because something in Naomi's quiet refusal had unlocked something in her, too. In 6C, Janelle Hart was still live, phone resting on her tray table, viewers pouring in with every passing minute. "She hasn't even raised her voice," Janelle whispered, "and yet the whole plane has shifted around her. This isn't protest. This is resistance." The word sat in the cabin like a quiet wind. Resistance. Naomi slowly unfolded the linen sheet on her lap, her fingertips smoothing the crease. The Flight Equity Initiative memo was no longer just a draft. It was a mirror reflecting everything she'd just experienced. Clause 2.1 stared back at her. In the presence of sustained procedural inequity or implicit bias affecting a stakeholder during active operations, the holder reserves the right to initiate direct compliance response under executive shareholder privileges. She exhaled. It wasn't about punishment. It never had been. It was about correction. Gabriella Cruz, still seated in the terminal outside, had her eyes fixed on Naomi through the window. Her laptop pinged. A message flashed from internal operations. From VeraJet ExecOps RE Stakeholder Elevation Alert Status Tier 1. Confirmed recommended action. Await escalation protocol pending stakeholder discretion. She didn't wait. She picked up her phone and called someone she'd only contacted twice before. "Hi, this is Gabriella Cruz, assistant to Naomi Ellington. I'm invoking standby notification for Clause 11.3. No, she hasn't confirmed yet, but she's unfolding the memo. That's how I know. Inside the aircraft." Naomi refolded the paper and placed it back inside her folder. She didn't look left or right. She simply reached into her coat pocket and retrieved a pen. Not a plastic one, not from the airline. This one was silver, engraved with her initials, gifted years ago when Ellington Tech passed their Series B valuation. She clicked it softly. The sound was quiet, deliberate, and somehow louder than words. Carter Benson cleared his throat. He had remained silent since their brief exchange, but something in the air told him the moment was becoming historic, whether he liked it or not. "I think," he said carefully, "maybe they should make some kind of announcement." Naomi turned her head just slightly. What would they say? He hesitated. That they made a mistake? They didn't make a mistake. She replied. Carter frowned. They made an assumption, she clarified, and then they doubled down on it. That's not error, that's pattern. He looked away again. Naomi returned her gaze to the clouds. Her fingers lightly tapped the closed folder on her tray table. Janelle whispered into her mic again. "She's doing something. Not sure what it is yet, but I know it matters. You can feel it." Lauren approached slowly. She stood near Naomi's seat but didn't speak right away. Her eyes landed on the folder, then on the silver pen, then finally on Naomi's face. "I'd like to offer you a sincere apology," she began. Naomi didn't respond. Lauren tried again. "I understand now that what happened, how we treated you, it wasn't acceptable. Naomi finally turned to her, steady as a level beam. "Do you understand why it happened?" Lauren blinked. "I believe so." "Say it," Naomi said softly. Lauren hesitated. Around them, the silence leaned in. "Because we saw a woman who didn't look like the kind of person who flies in business class," she said slowly, and Naomi prompted, "And we assumed you didn't belong here." Naomi nodded once. "That's closer." Lauren swallowed. Her voice caught slightly. "I'm truly sorry." Naomi looked at her, not cruelly, not coldly, but with a kind of gravity that made words heavier. "Apologies don't fix systems. They acknowledge them. If you truly understand what happened, you'll help make sure it never happens again. Not just to me, but to anyone who doesn't match your expectations of worthiness." Lauren nodded slowly, her eyes glistening. Tiana, standing nearby, stepped forward now. "I want to say something too," she said. Naomi turned. "I've worked for this airline for 4 years," Tiana began, "and I've seen things. Not always loud, but they add up. Looks, tone, doubt. I didn't say anything earlier because, well, you know why. But seeing you sit here, calm, clear, unshaken, I just want to say thank you." Naomi nodded again. Her voice was quiet. "Speak up next time," she said. "For you, not for me." Tiana swallowed hard. "I will." From the jump seat near the front, another flight attendant whispered to a colleague, "I think something big is happening. I don't know what it is, but this feels like more than a flight delay." Outside, in the control office, 2 terminals away, a red alert flashed across a monitor. "Internal oversight. Pending stakeholder, Ellington. Naomi Claus, 11.3 status arming." A supervisor saw the signal and picked up the phone. "Ma'am," he said urgently into the receiver, "she hasn't triggered it yet, but she's preparing. We need executive response. Immediately. Back in seat 3B. Naomi reached for her phone. She dialed only one number. It rang twice. A calm voice answered. "This is Ellington's governance line." Naomi spoke clearly. "This is Naomi Ellington. I am preparing to activate Clause 11.3. Confirm you are standing by." The voice replied without hesitation. "Confirmed. Standing by." She hung up. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't announce herself to the plane, but in every corner of the aircraft, people felt it. The silent resistance was ending. The system was about to be called in. It was the blinking light on the phone that said everything, red, steady, unapologetic. Janelle Hart hadn't meant to become a broadcaster. She was a photographer by trade, used to capturing stillness, not live-streaming the kind of storm that unfolded seat by seat. But here she was, seated in 6C, phone upright on a travel-sized tripod, comments pouring in like a flood. She whispered into her mic again. "This is Flight 4682 on Verijet Airlines. The woman in seat 3B is Naomi Ellington. Yes, that Naomi Ellington. Look her up." More comments scrolled past. "She's the founder of Ellington Tech. I thought she stepped away from public life. She's on this flight, and they tried to remove her. This is going viral." In row 4, the older woman who had spoken earlier leaned into the aisle again. Her name was Mrs. Dolores Carmichael. She was 74, a retired university professor, and not someone easily impressed. But watching Naomi had stirred something she hadn't felt in years, a kind of righteous pride, a memory of dignity long denied but now reclaimed in quiet form. Dolores looked across the aisle and said, "Baby, you don't have to say another word. We're saying it for you." Naomi smiled softly, then returned her gaze to the tray table, where her folder now sat closed. She hadn't moved much since she made the call. She hadn't needed to. The cabin knew who she was now. So did the airline. Tiana Brooks stood in the galley at the front, eyes on the cabin monitor above her. She could see the live view of rows 1 through 6, see the way heads were turned toward Naomi, see the look in Lauren Hadley's eyes, and the timer on the screen counting down the delay. Lauren finally broke the silence behind the curtain. "We're going to get written up." Tiana didn't answer. She's probably already contacted the board. We're not trained for this. Still, Tiana didn't reply. Lauren turned toward her. "You think I'm the bad guy, don't you?" Tiana looked up slowly. "I think you made a choice." Lauren folded her arms. "We were following procedure." Tiana shook her head. "No, we were following assumption." Outside the plane, the ripple effect had already begun. At a coffee bar near gate E19, a teenage girl sat with her mother, watching the stream on her phone. She nudged her mom. "She's trending." Who her mom asked. The woman on the plane, Naomi Ellington. They tried to remove her from business class, and she's a shareholder, like a real one. The mother put down her cup. "What airline is this ViraJet?" The mother frowned. "I fly them every month." The girl replied. So did she. Inside the airline's operations center 3 floors above the terminal. A meeting was already underway. Not the scheduled one. This one had formed in reaction. Legal, comms, and crisis response were gathered around a bank of screens. On one screen, a paused live stream from seat 6C. On another, Naomi's shareholder profile. It blinked with red alerts. Stakeholder, Ellington. Naomi status tier 1. Voting class, oversight rights. Active clause, 11.3, preparing for execution. A junior staffer spoke up. "Should we stop the stream?" The director of communications shook her head. "You can't stop something that's already everywhere." The legal officer leaned forward. "Has she filed anything?" "Not yet." "Then we move. Now, back on the plane." Naomi reached for her phone again. She opened her notes app, typed for 20 seconds, and saved the file with the title, ATLG 4682, Incident Timeline, Initial Notes. Then she slid the phone back into her coat pocket. The message was clear. She wasn't documenting this moment for sympathy. She was logging it like evidence. Marcus Reed appeared in the aisle again. He was sweating. His tie was slightly loose now. His voice, less firm. "Ms. Ellington, I've just spoken with corporate. Our executive response team is activating on your notification. They've asked for a formal briefing when we land." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "When we land," Marcus nodded. "Yes, ma'am. The flight will proceed shortly. There's a request from our senior operations officer to speak with you personally." Naomi didn't flinch. "She can board now. We're still on the ground." Marcus blinked. "She's not at the gate yet. Then she's late." Marcus hesitated. "I'll notify them you're requesting an on-ground conversation." "No," Naomi said calmly. "I'm not requesting. I'm requiring." He paused again. "Yes, ma'am." He turned and walked briskly toward the flight deck. Tiana moved closer. "Would you like a privacy screen?" Naomi shook her head. "Let them see." Gabriella's phone buzzed again in the terminal. A new message from Naomi. "Begin draft governance address, Flight Equity Directive. Attach clauses 2.1 through 5.4. Gabriella stood up. The people at nearby gates looked up, recognizing her from earlier. She didn't stop to explain. She was walking now, toward gate E19, toward the room where the decisions were being made, on board. Naomi closed her eyes again, not to rest, to center. She had learned this discipline years ago, to remain still when the room wanted you to shrink, to choose calm when others chose confusion, to speak only when your voice had the full weight of silence behind it. Outside, a black SUV pulled up on the tarmac. The door opened. A woman in a navy pantsuit stepped out, sunglasses on, jaw set. Isabel Crane, CEO of VeraJet Airlines. She didn't run, but her stride was fast. Inside the aircraft, Marcus approached Naomi once more. "She's here." Naomi nodded once. "Escort her in." Lauren Hadley turned as the cabin door opened again. She took one look at Isabel and stepped out of the way. The CEO walked slowly down the aisle. Every passenger watched. She reached row 3. Naomi did not stand. Isabel extended her hand. "Miss Ellington, I'm Isabel Crane. I believe we have a great deal to discuss." Naomi didn't shake the hand. Not yet. Instead, she turned toward the aisle and gestured to the seat across from hers. "Sit down." Isabel Crane did not like surprises. She had spent 20 years in corporate aviation learning how to eliminate them. Everything about her world was designed for control. Measured fuel, measured language, measured smiles. She had trained herself to anticipate turbulence before it appeared on the radar. But nothing in her training had prepared her for Naomi Ellington. The CEO of VeraJet now stood at row 3, one hand resting lightly on the leather headrest of seat 3A. Naomi remained seated in 3B, legs crossed at the ankle, folder closed on the tray table, expression unreadable. "Would you like me to sit?" Isabel asked again. Softer this time. Naomi motioned to the seat across from her. "I invited you, didn't I?" Passengers leaned just slightly in their seats, pretending to adjust tray tables or blankets while listening without appearing to. Phones weren't recording now, but the atmosphere still was. Every pause, every glance, every word. Isabel sat, not reluctantly, but carefully. "I want to begin by saying how deeply sorry I am," she said. Naomi looked at her, for Isabel hesitated, for the way you were treated, for the assumptions, for the delay, for all of it. Naomi waited a breath longer before speaking. "And what was it exactly that you saw from your office?" Isabel folded her hands. "I saw the live stream. I saw the incident report. And I saw that we had failed one of our most important stakeholders." Naomi's voice was level. "I wasn't looking for status acknowledgement." "I know," Isabel said quickly, "but it's still relevant." To whom Naomi asked. Isabel swallowed. She wasn't used to being questioned like this. She was used to control in rooms, not being reviewed inside one at 30,000 feet, still parked on the tarmac. Naomi leaned forward just slightly. "If I had not been a stakeholder, what would have happened to me today?" Isabel looked down. "We would have relocated you, possibly with a voucher. Possibly," Naomi repeated, "because my existence here would have remained suspicious. Unlikely. Conditional. I understand that now," Isabel said. "Truly." Naomi tilted her head. "I'm not sure you do." She reached into her tote and removed the ID badge again. The metal glinted under the overhead lights. She placed it on the tray table between them. Isabel glanced at it. "I know who you are." Naomi looked at her steadily. "Do you?" Isabel blinked. "You're Naomi Ellington, founder of Ellington Tech, investor in transit infrastructure, Class A shareholder in our airline. You acquired 19.4% equity last fall during the Sunrise merger. You sit on 2 national transportation advisory boards and are registered as an internal governance observer for this carrier under Clause 11. Naomi nodded once. And yet, to your employees, I was just another woman in the wrong seat. Isabel had no answer. Naomi opened the folder. Inside was a printed sheet with a bold title across the top. Flight 4682, Governance Breach, Tier 1 Trigger. She slid the paper toward Isabel. I'm invoking Clause 11.3, she said calmly. Isabel froze. Right now, Naomi's eyes didn't move, already did. A visible wave of silence rolled through the nearby rows. Though most passengers couldn't hear the exact words, they could sense their weight. Isabel took the paper with both hands. This will halt 3 outbound flights, maybe more. Naomi nodded. Good. It should, but we have procedures in place. Internal review. Delay waivers. I can open a meeting with the board by end of day. Naomi looked her in the eye. Accountability doesn't wait for end of day. From the front of the cabin, Marcus Reed watched without breathing. Tiana Brooks stood behind him, one hand clasped at her chest. Janelle whispered into her mic again. She just triggered something. I don't know what it means exactly, but the CEO is sweating. Isabel folded her hands around the memo. I want to get this right. I want to move fast, but I also want to understand what you want. Ms. Ellington. Naomi leaned back in her seat. I want a public acknowledgement. Not for me. For every passenger who's ever been profiled at the gate. Isabel nodded slowly. Understood. I want the 3 staff involved in this incident removed from active duty pending review. Not fired, reviewed, done. I want a third-party audit of the last 18 months of discrimination complaints filed against your airline. Isabel looked up. That's a significant volume. Naomi didn't blink. Then you should have acted sooner. Isabel wrote it down. I want new policy language written and distributed within 30 days outlining specific anti-bias protocols and training mandates for frontline staff. Who writes it? Isabel asked. Naomi tapped her pen once against the tray table. I will. Isabel smiled faintly. You're not just fixing this moment. You're restructuring us. Naomi returned the smile. Barely. I'm reminding you who's really watching. The words landed like a gavel. From row 4, Dolores Carmichael whispered. That's the part they never see coming. Lauren Hadley had quietly stepped into the galley but kept her ears open. Her hands trembled slightly as she pulled a napkin from the drawer. She wiped a non-existent spill from the counter, not to clean, but to steady herself. Back at the gate, Gabriella Cruz had reached the operations floor. She presented her ID, was granted immediate access, and walked into the conference room where monitors displayed the flight in real time. A junior analyst asked, Do you work with Ms. Ellington? Gabriella looked straight ahead. I work for her. You're about to inside the aircraft. Naomi stood up for the first time since boarding. Slowly, deliberately, I'll be addressing the passengers briefly, she said. Isabel blinked. You want to address the plane? Naomi smiled gently. I've always spoken in boardrooms. Today, I'd like to speak to the people we serve. Isabel stood too, a step behind. Naomi walked toward the front of the cabin. Tiana stepped aside without a word, opened the intercom cabinet, and handed her the microphone. Naomi held it in her hand for a breath. Then she spoke. Her voice was low but unmistakable. "Good afternoon. This is Naomi Ellington, a stakeholder in this airline. I'd like to thank you for your patience during today's delay." A pause. "I was removed from my seat in business class earlier today due to an error. But the error wasn't just in the manifest. It was in the assumptions made when I sat in it." Another pause. "I won't be raising my voice today. I don't need to. The facts are enough. One more beat. I want you to know that policy will change because of what happened. Not because I was loud, but because I was still. Because I stayed in my seat. Because I knew I belonged there." She handed the mic back to Tiana and returned to her row. No applause, no performance, just silence, but the kind that meant something was finally being heard. The intercom mic clicked off with a soft finality. Naomi Ellington handed it back to Tiana Brooks and walked slowly, silently, back to seat 3B. She did not look left or right. She did not search for approval. Her silence carried the weight of a verdict. Passengers didn't clap. That would have cheapened it. Instead, they leaned back in their seats, absorbed in thought. Some stared out the window. Others lowered their phones. Even those who had watched passively felt it now. Something had changed. In the aisle, Isabel Crane stood with her hands clasped in front of her. She had spent years on podiums and in boardrooms. But what Naomi had done in 3 minutes with a microphone had pierced deeper than any prepared speech. It wasn't about power anymore. It was about credibility. And in that moment, Isabel knew she didn't have it. Naomi sat down. She adjusted her coat, then reached into her tote and pulled out her phone. Her expression was calm, not triumphant, measured. She dialed one number. The call rang once. A voice answered. "Yes, Ms. Ellington, this is confirmation." Naomi said, "I am activating full execution of Clause 11.3. There was no hesitation. Confirmed." She ended the call and placed her phone on the tray table. 3 rows back, Janelle Hart looked up sharply from her screen. She just made a call. She whispered into her live stream, "Something big is happening." On the tarmac, the ripple moved fast. Inside ViraJet's Operations Crisis Suite, a red alert lit up the dashboard. Screens updated in real time. Systems across terminals E and F began auto-flagging upcoming departures. Notice Stakeholder Emergency Oversight Trigger. Active, all outbound flights in affected zone must delay departure by 45 minutes pending board review. Authorized by Ellington. Naomi, Class A, voting Tier 1. The Director of Operations stood up so quickly his chair fell over. "Someone find me Crane," he snapped. "She's on board," a staffer replied. "Then she needs to call in." Now, in the terminal, Gabriella Cruz received a one-word message on her phone from Naomi. "Send." Gabriella didn't blink. She opened the folder on her laptop and double-clicked the file marked F.E.D. Ellington, Final. She hit send. In less than 30 seconds, inboxes across the ViraJet board lit up with the subject line, "Flight Equity Directive. Immediate compliance action required." It included 6 pages of procedural reforms, a 3-tier timeline, audit checkpoints, and a note at the top. This directive is not a proposal. It is a condition of continued investment. Back on board. Naomi reached into her folder again. She pulled out a slim silver card and passed it to Marcus Reed, who had quietly approached her row. He held it like it was made of glass. "What is this?" he asked. "Temporary Access Authority," she said. Use it to coordinate the shutdown order. E and F terminals. Non-essential departures only." Marcus looked stunned. "I don't have the clearance to." "You do now," she said gently. He nodded, slowly, and disappeared down the aisle. Lauren Hadley stood at the edge of the galley, watching all of it unfold. She looked like she was trying to memorize everything, like she knew she'd be asked to explain it later and still wouldn't find the words. Dolores Carmichael from 4D leaned toward the aisle again. "You didn't come here to fly, did you?" Naomi looked over. "I came to activate the system." Dolores smiled. "Well, you did." From across the aisle, Carter Benson finally spoke again. His voice was quieter now, humbler. "Is this going to go public?" Naomi didn't turn toward him. "It already is." And it was. By the time Naomi closed her folder, the live stream from Janelle Hart had passed 250,000 viewers. Screenshots of Naomi's intercom speech were trending under the hashtag Jachna She Stayed Seated. Twitter was already calling it the calmest corporate reckoning ever captured on a domestic flight. A clip from her speech had just hit the morning news cycle. "I won't be raising my voice today. I don't need to. The facts are enough. News anchors across 3 cities were quoting it. Inside the aircraft." Isabel Crane returned from the galley after a brief call to headquarters. She looked different now. Paler, strained. She leaned toward Naomi. The board would like to meet. Within the hour. Naomi nodded once. "I'll be there. But not in secret." Isabel hesitated. "Meaning, I want a live briefing." Naomi said, "Internal access, stream to verified shareholders and frontline staff. That's highly irregular. It's highly necessary." Isabel sighed. "Okay." Naomi tapped the folder. "Print out 10 copies of the directive. Have one placed in every meeting room by the time I arrive." Isabel didn't question her again. She simply nodded and walked away. Naomi reached for her water, took a sip, and sat back. For the first time that day, she allowed herself to breathe fully, not a breath of relief, a breath of intention. Tiana appeared a few minutes later, crouched slightly so their conversation would remain private. "They're ready to push the statement from HQ. It'll go live in 5 minutes. Would you like to approve the language?" Naomi shook her head. "No, I'll release my own." Tiana smiled faintly. "Understood." Naomi looked at her with warmth. "You're part of this now," she said. "Don't shrink from it. I won't." Tiana whispered. "Not anymore." Outside, the operations center had entered full lockdown. A dozen flights delayed, internal bulletins issued, legal advisors pulled into unscheduled sessions, PR strategists attempting to draft a message that wouldn't feel like panic. But the world had already seen it, and Naomi hadn't yelled. She had moved like wind across paper, measured, unstoppable. In row 6, Janelle whispered again, "You're watching history." In seat 3B. Naomi picked up her pen and opened a fresh page in her notebook. At the top, she wrote Flight 4682, the call that moved the sky. Then she wrote one line beneath it. It started with silence and ended with submission. Not hers, theirs. The meeting room smelled like old paper and filtered silence. On the 3rd floor of Terminal E, behind a frosted glass door with a discreet gold plaque that read Vera Jet Governance Suite. 10 people sat around a polished table that had not seen urgency in years. Until now. Naomi Ellington entered without ceremony. No entourage, no briefcase, just her silver pen, the flight equity directive tucked beneath her arm, and the same calm that had carried her through every seat change, every delay, every implication that she did not belong. She moved to the head of the table. The room stiffened. Isabel Crane was already there. She had arrived 10 minutes earlier, flanked by two executives who had spent the entire time whispering about the shareholder clause Naomi had just invoked. None of them thought she would show up this quickly. None of them expected she would come alone. Naomi placed the folder gently on the table and took her seat. She looked at no one in particular and yet everyone at once. "I'll speak first," she said. There were no objections. "I have submitted a formal governance action under Clause 11.3. This action was triggered by a bias-based incident that occurred during boarding and continued in flight on 4682. The airline failed to properly identify a shareholder. It failed to uphold its own non-discrimination protocols, and it failed to train its frontline staff to see passengers as more than assumptions." The room was quiet. She continued, "I do not demand apologies. I require structure. The directive sent this morning contains 6 binding steps. None of them are optional. All of them are overdue." One of the men seated near Isabel cleared his throat. His name was Daniel Cray, VP of Operations. He had 25 years of experience and the weary expression of someone who didn't like public pressure. "Ms. Ellington," he began, "we're still reviewing the implications of this clause activation. It will delay over 24 flights if not contained quickly. And it sets a precedent." Naomi looked at him. "It's meant to." Another executive leaned forward. "Judith Phelps, Head of Legal Affairs. We respect the authority that your Class A shares afford you," she said, voice cautious. "But procedural execution on this scale, especially with a public-facing component, creates liability for us." Naomi responded without blinking. "Do you know what creates more liability? Failing to act when we know a system is broken." Judith looked down. Naomi placed the printed directive in front of her. "There's a difference between protecting the company and protecting the people who keep it running. Your legal notes treat them as the same. They're not." Gabriella Cruz entered quietly through the side door. She carried 10 more printed copies of the directive. She passed them around the table without a word. Naomi gave her a nod of acknowledgement. Gabriella stepped back and remained near the wall, observing. Isabel finally spoke. "What you did this morning was extraordinary. You remained composed when others didn't. You exposed a systemic flaw in the very space we thought we'd optimized." Naomi didn't flinch. "You optimized it for comfort, not for equity." Isabel inclined her head. "You're right." The room seemed to lean inward at that admission. Naomi looked toward the monitors behind the table. One of them displayed a rolling stream of social media responses. The hashtag "She Stayed Seated" had topped trending charts. A video of her intercom speech had already been clipped, subtitled, translated into Spanish and Korean. Flight attendants from other airlines were reposting it. Comments like, "She said it so soft, but it hit so hard. This is what quiet power looks like. I've never wanted to clap for a corporate investor until now." Naomi gestured toward the screen. "I didn't ask for this attention, but I'm not afraid of it either. If ViraJet is going to survive this moment, it needs to stop acting like this is just another PR incident. This is a cultural reckoning, inside and out." Daniel Cray adjusted his tie. "We understand your position," he said. "But we do need to know, are you intending to remain as a shareholder after this?" Naomi looked him directly in the eye. "I'm not going anywhere." He nodded slowly. "Then we're ready to follow your lead. The words held more weight than he realized. Naomi stood. "I'll return to the plane now. You'll send confirmation of the directive's implementation by end of day. Tiana Brooks is to be moved to policy liaison. Lauren Hadley is to be placed under review, not dismissal. We correct. We do not erase. That's how culture changes." No one disagreed. As Naomi turned to leave, Gabriella followed behind her. Just before they exited the room, Naomi stopped. She looked back once more. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It never was. It's about every seat someone had to prove they belonged in. Let that be the last time they have to." Then she left. Outside the conference suite, reporters had begun to gather near the terminal hall. No one had told them to come. They followed the noise, the tweets, the live stream. When Naomi appeared, a hush fell. Someone lifted a phone, but it wasn't to ask for comment. It was reverent, observing, documenting. She walked through the terminal like she had through the cabin, quietly, powerfully. Back on the aircraft, the cabin crew was preparing for delayed departure. Tiana Brooks was adjusting settings at the front, checking the new flight manifest. Her hands were steady now. Marcus Reed approached her. "You're being promoted," he said. "Policy liaison." Tiana blinked. "Seriously, seriously." She smiled, but it wasn't just happiness, it was recognition. For the first time, she was being seen for what she offered, not just what she managed. A few seats back, Lauren Hadley sat quietly with a pen and paper in her lap. She'd started writing, not a defense, a reflection. Naomi reboarded 5 minutes later. The cabin was silent as she took her seat again. This time, no one questioned it. No one glanced sideways. She belonged, and they knew it. Carter Benson leaned over slightly. "I read the directive," he said. "It's good. It's bigger than this flight." Naomi nodded. "That's the point." Dolores Carmichael adjusted her reading glasses. "You just made history. Baby." Naomi exhaled, slow and steady. "No, we're just starting to make the future." The plane hadn't moved an inch, but everything inside had shifted. Naomi Ellington settled back into seat 3B. This time, her posture was different. Not defensive, not reactive. Rooted. She belonged here now in more than title. She belonged in the eyes of everyone watching. Across the aisle. Carter Benson shifted awkwardly in his seat. He had closed his laptop. Even he knew now this wasn't a moment to scroll through unread emails. This was the kind of moment you told people about years later. "I was there. I saw her speak, a few rows back." Janelle Hart checked the battery on her phone and resumed her quiet narration for her growing live stream. "She's back on the plane, and rumor has it she's going to speak again, not just for the cameras, for us, near the front." Dolores Carmichael folded her hands like she was preparing for church. She'd witnessed marches, legislation, decades of declarations, but rarely had she seen one person change a room like this. Tiana Brooks approached Naomi, offering her a sealed bottle of water. "Are you ready?" she asked gently. Naomi took the bottle but didn't open it. "As I'll ever be." Tiana gestured toward the jump seat area by the forward galley. The intercom mic waited there, coiled and clean, like a small invitation. Naomi stood. She took slow, deliberate steps down the aisle. No one moved, not even the flight crew. The pilot remained in the cockpit. Marcus Reed stood by the exit, observing. Gabriella Cruz, who had rejoined the flight for the final leg, sat in the back row, watching her mentor with something close to reverence. Naomi reached the front and picked up the intercom. The cabin lights dimmed slightly. It was not planned. It just happened that way, as if the aircraft itself knew it was time to listen. She spoke. Her voice was steady, but never loud. "This morning, I boarded this flight like any other. My name wasn't announced. No one rolled out a red carpet. I didn't ask for a welcome. I just wanted to sit in the seat I'd paid for." A pause, and for a moment, it was suggested I didn't belong there, not because my ticket was invalid, but because someone looked at me and assumed I was out of place. She glanced briefly toward the rows. I didn't yell. I didn't record. I didn't escalate. I just stayed in my seat, because I knew I had a right to be in it. The cabin was still. I speak to you now, not as an executive, not as a shareholder, not even as a woman who experienced bias. I speak to you as someone who believes the systems we build should reflect the people they serve. She gripped the mic a little tighter. If my name had been Sarah instead of Naomi, I would not have been questioned. If my skin had been lighter, I would not have been delayed. That is not opinion. That is reality. She looked directly at the older couple in row 2, who had witnessed it all in silence. They both nodded, eyes glistening. I chose to respond today not with outrage, but with structure, with policy, with a plan. Because change that lasts does not come from noise. It comes from clarity. Naomi paused again. You have just witnessed the implementation of a policy shift across this airline. But that's not what matters most. What matters is that every one of you knows that dignity is not situational. It's not conditional. It's not earned by proving yourself to strangers. It is your right. Dolores let out a soft exhale. Someone behind her whispered, "Amen." Naomi looked at the flight attendants now, Lauren Hadley among them. Their eyes were full of complex things. Guilt, yes, but also something deeper. Recognition, maybe even respect. To the crew, Naomi said, "This is not condemnation, it is calibration. We get better by seeing what was hidden before." She smiled gently at Tiana, who lowered her head in appreciation. And to those watching outside this plane, passengers, employees, board members, the press know that this is not the end of something. This is the beginning. There will be audits, there will be forums, there will be stories that never made the news, finally brought to light. Her voice did not waver, but most of all, there will be seats taken that no one can question. She set the mic down. No clapping, no cheering, just stillness. That sacred kind of stillness that came when truth had been spoken without defense, without rage, without apology. Naomi turned and walked slowly back to seat 3B. This time, as she passed row after row, people didn't just move out of her way. They looked her in the eyes. Some mouthed thank you. Others simply nodded. She sat. She didn't exhale. She didn't collapse into the seat. She just returned to it like it was hers. Because it was. 10 minutes later, the captain came on the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We have received final clearance for takeoff. Estimated flight time is 1 hour and 22 minutes. We'll be in the air shortly." Tiana completed her safety checks. Lauren stood near the jump seat, more aware of her role than ever before. For the first time in her career, she was no longer going through motions. She was watching, listening, reflecting. The plane taxied to the runway. Outside, the morning sun had shifted, casting golden light across the wing. Janelle Hart ended her live stream with a final whisper. History was made today, and not because someone shouted, but because someone stayed. The wheels lifted. Naomi stared out the window, expression unreadable, not because she felt nothing, but because she felt everything and still chose to move forward with grace. The headlines came faster than the flight could land. By the time Flight 4682 touched down in Atlanta, Naomi Ellington's name was already trending across platforms that didn't even cover aviation. News alerts flashed across smartphones, shareholder sparks, mid-air policy reform, Black CEO changes airline culture without raising her voice. Naomi Ellington delivers the speech of the year at 30,000 feet. The moment had left the cabin, crossed the tarmac, and entered history. Inside the arrival gate, passengers deplaned in silence, not the usual exhausted kind, the reverent kind. Many glanced back at Naomi as they exited. Some offered nods, others whispered words they didn't trust themselves to say out loud. Thank you. That meant something. You spoke for more than yourself. Naomi remained in her seat until the cabin was nearly empty. Tiana Brooks stood by the door, waiting. Lauren Hadley had stepped aside to allow Naomi space. Even now, her body language had changed. She was smaller somehow, not from fear but from realization. She knew she had missed something vital, and now she was learning. When Naomi finally stood, she looked around the empty cabin, not with pride, not even with satisfaction, just with quiet acknowledgement. She had come for one reason, and she had delivered. Outside the terminal, a small group of reporters had gathered. Gabriella Cruz emerged first, shielding Naomi with her presence without ever touching her. Cameras lifted, microphones extended. Ms. Ellington, will you be issuing a press release? No. Naomi replied, will there be disciplinary action? There has already been reflection, and reflection is the beginning of reform. Did you plan this flight as a test? Naomi looked into the lens. I don't have to test systems. I just have to exist inside them. That's enough to reveal the flaws. She walked past them without raising her voice, without rushing her steps. That night, Naomi returned to her hotel room and unplugged every device. She sat in silence for nearly an hour. She wrote nothing, spoke to no one, just breathed, not to decompress, to integrate. What had started as a routine flight had become a national conversation. On Capitol Hill, Senator Marlene Wright watched Naomi's speech from her tablet twice. Then she forwarded it to her staff with a single line. Draft the passenger equity bill. She knew legislation was about timing, and this moment was more than ripe. It was roaring. News anchors discussed Naomi's language. Analysts broke down her poise. Civil rights advocates praised her restraint. Airline executives and other companies held emergency meetings, wondering if their policies would hold up under similar scrutiny. In a televised interview, former pilot and aviation safety consultant Jim Raddick said, "What she did on that plane was more than policy. It was cultural correction. She shifted the altitude of accountability." The airline's board issued a formal statement by morning. We acknowledge the events that took place aboard Flight 4682. We are grateful for Ms. Ellington's leadership and are committed to full implementation of the Flight Equity Directive. In the following days, training modules were rewritten, anonymous employee complaint systems were strengthened. Internal communications began to address bias with less avoidance and more urgency. The culture had not yet changed, but it was moving, and movement, Naomi believed was the beginning of hope. She did not go on a press tour. She declined interviews. She didn't repost the trending videos. Instead, she returned to her regular life, which was not regular at all. Meetings, boards, strategies, and now, oversight. Gabriella watched her with awe. "You do know you could write a book now," she said one evening. "I could," Naomi replied, "but then people would make it about me, and it never was. You think it'll last?" The change, Naomi looked out the window. It depends on what we each do the next time someone is told they don't belong. 1 week later, Naomi received a package at her office. No return address, just a small envelope inside with a handwritten card. In delicate script, it read, for the first time in 18 years, "I saw someone speak the way I've always wanted to. Quiet, clear, unshakable. I was in 4D. You probably don't remember me, but I will never forget you. Thank you. Dolores Carmichael." Beneath the card was a tiny paper airplane, folded from a page of the in-flight safety manual. It wasn't meant to fly. It was meant to hold meaning. Naomi kept it on her desk. By the following month, 5 other airlines had announced audits of their discrimination incident records. 3 rewrote parts of their customer service training within weeks. A new startup began designing software to track real-time equity compliance on board commercial flights. But, most significantly, a congressional hearing was scheduled. Senator Wright took her seat in front of the panel. "This isn't just about one incident," she said. "It's about the quiet erosion of dignity in our public systems, and about what happens when one woman sits down and refuses to disappear." She tapped the desk. "I move to advance the passenger equity bill." In an office somewhere across the country, Naomi watched the hearing alone. She did not smile, but her eyes softened. A knock at the door. Tiana entered. "I thought you'd want to know. The new liaison policy went live today." Naomi nodded. "Good. You've done something rare," Tiana said. "You started something that doesn't need you to finish it." Naomi turned to her. "We all need to finish it, just not from the front." And that was the truth. She didn't need a podium. She just needed a seat. And she had taken it, not for herself, but for every passenger who had been told, through silence or policy or sideways glances, that they didn't quite belong. She had shown them what it looked like to stay, to speak without shouting, to reform without spectacle, to lead from a cabin seat and move the ground far below. 1 month later, Gate E19 at Denver Horizon International looked nearly the same. Same polished tile, same slow-moving line at the coffee kiosk, same gentle announcements drifting overhead. But something had shifted. It wasn't in the infrastructure. It was in the atmosphere. People moved differently, watched differently, waited differently. And somewhere in that shift, a new sign had been placed near the check-in counter. It was subtle, simple black lettering on brushed metal. Most wouldn't notice it unless they looked carefully. "This airline is a participant in the Passenger Equity Initiative." It didn't scream change. It whispered it. And that whisper was more powerful than any billboard. Inside the gate area, a young black woman in a navy blue pantsuit stood in line for boarding. She held her infant son in one arm and a diaper bag in the other. She looked tired but collected. Her name was Joy Hamilton, a financial analyst returning from a conference. This was her first flight alone with her child since her husband passed. A few feet away, the gate agent made eye contact. "Ma'am, are you traveling alone?" "Yes," Need help pre-boarding? Joy nodded. That'd be great. Thank you. No strange looks, no assumptions, just recognition. That was new. Meanwhile, down the concourse, a small team of uniformed airline staff stood around a digital display. They were reading over a new set of guidelines, de-escalation training, passenger dignity protocol, and real-time reporting channels. One of them, a white flight attendant named Bryce, murmured, "This is that Ellington stuff, right?" Another nodded. "Yeah, started with her." Bryce scratched his head. "Honestly, it makes sense. About time someone cleaned it up." On the observation deck, a family of 4 watched planes taxi below. Their youngest, a girl of 10, pointed out a passing aircraft. "Daddy, is that the kind of plane Miss Naomi was on?" Her father smiled. "It is. She flew that route a month ago." The little girl beamed. "I want to be like her when I grow up." Back in a quiet corner of the airport lounge, Naomi Ellington herself sat in a leather chair, a tea in front of her and a paperback in her lap. She was dressed simply, as always, a long cardigan, soft scarf, silver watch. Her phone buzzed, but she didn't answer right away. Across from her, Gabriella Cruz scrolled through her inbox. So far, we've received 78 formal equity statements from other carriers, 11 international, 3 private jet companies are asking for consultations. Naomi looked up with a faint smile. And the lawsuits, Gabriella chuckled. 0. Turns out transparency is cheaper than silence. Tiana Brooks entered the lounge a moment later, carrying a small white box. She had been traveling between training hubs for 2 weeks, implementing the first wave of the new policy sessions. "Sorry I'm late. Security wanted to talk about the onboard liaison badge." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "Problem?" Tiana grinned. "No, they just didn't know what it meant. Not yet, anyway." She placed the box on the table and opened it. Inside was a metal plaque. Cabin 3B Vera Jet Flight 4682, where silence became strength. Naomi stared at it for a long moment. The words weren't showy. They didn't need to be. Gabriella smiled. "We thought it should be real, not just a story passed around." Naomi touched the edge of the plaque. "It already is real," she said quietly. "You made it so." Tiana sat down, letting the exhaustion show in her shoulders. "You were right," she murmured. "Change doesn't come from volume. It comes from structure." Naomi nodded. "And people willing to stay seated even when the world asks them to move." Outside the lounge, the airport was bustling. Flights were boarding. Coffee orders were being shouted over the hum. But something stayed different, in a different terminal. Senator Marlene Wright was meeting with journalists, laying out the final language of the passenger equity bill. "We're calling it the Ellington provision," she said. "And before anyone asks yes," she approved the name. She paused. "But don't mistake this for a tribute. It's a blueprint." A young reporter raised a hand. What made her approach work? Senator Wright answered without hesitation, because it was never about attention, it was about intention. Back in the lounge, Naomi prepared to leave. Her next flight wasn't for another hour, but she preferred arriving at the gate early. She always had. Gabriella stood. "Want me to walk you?" Naomi shook her head. "No need. I'll meet you both at the gate." She gathered her bag. As she walked through the lounge, a man near the bar recognized her. He started to approach, then stopped, then simply nodded in her direction. Naomi nodded back, just slightly, enough to say, "I see you too." At gate F7, she waited quietly by the windows, not to be noticed, just to be present. A young agent came over, eyes wide. "Ms. Ellington?" "Yes." He held out a fresh boarding pass. "We've moved you to seat 1A. No explanation needed. I just wanted to say thank you for all of this." Naomi took the pass. "Thank you for making it mean something." The intercom crackled. "Now, boarding flight 2136 to Seattle. Pre-boarding for those needing assistance and members of the passenger equity priority list." Naomi walked forward, calm and measured. She didn't need music. She didn't need a spotlight. She didn't need applause. She just needed the door to open. And it did. She never yelled. She never cursed. She didn't need to. Naomi Ellington changed an airline without leaving her seat. And in doing so, she reminded us that real power doesn't always shout sometimes. It simply refuses to disappear. In a world where black women are too often questioned, dismissed, or ignored, Naomi's quiet strength cracked a system that had been too comfortable for far too long. But this story isn't just about one woman. It's about all of us. About every moment we've been told to move when we knew we belonged. About every time bias was disguised as policy. About the deep harm of assumptions and the healing that begins when we finally see each other. So, the next time someone tells you they were silenced, believe them. The next time you witness injustice, don't look away. And if you ever feel invisible, remember Naomi Ellington. Remember what happened in seat 3B. If this story stirred something in you, if you believe dignity should never be negotiable, please like, share, and subscribe, because we're not done. More stories like this are coming. Stories that speak softly but shake the world. Thank you for watching.